Hi guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to No Limits, a mid-rap podcast, episode 22. Mike, how you doing?
Wow. 22.
Can you believe 22?
That's something. Congrats to you. Congrats to us.
Congrats to you. I forgot to bring that up when we hit 20, so I figured 22 was just as good.
I feel like 25 will be the nice milestone. We're probably going to record it and not have no idea.
I
And then by
know.
like 28, we'll be like, oh, did you know we're 25 episodes in already?
I just saw it right now, so that's why. But I just got to see you this weekend. It was great.
What a blast, man. And I hope our listeners caught a little bit of a recording while we're on the golf course last episode in the post credits. But that was fun. That was fun seeing the boys, kicking back, playing some golf, eating good food.
Great food. Diane does it right. Yeah, that was funny. You just shoving a microphone in my mouth, in my face, golfing. Like, let's get a pod in real quick. Something for the pod.
It's like, we're running out of time. We're not going to sit down and talk total power, so we got to do this thing right now. With the wind blowing, oh, it was a disaster. I feel like tipping over, trying to take a shot with my 5-iron.
On a more serious note, we want to welcome one of our newest patrons, George M. Thank you very much for your support. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do this. So, big shout out to George.
Yeah, and speaking of patrons, we have an announcement to make about our September book giveaway. We're 10 days into the month, and we haven't mentioned it yet. So for all our patrons, anyone who joins this month, we are going to let you pick the book. So if you're the winner of our book giveaway, we'll pick the name of one patron this month. You get to choose any of these autographed books. We have Executive Power, Extreme Measures, Pursuit of Honor, Act of Treason, Protect and Defend, and a Kyle Mills special, The Survivor. That was his first, right? That was Kyle's first.
Yeah, Kyle's first.
That one's signed by Kyle. The rest are signed by Vince. And the winner will get to pick one. So become a patron this month, and we will enter your name into that contest.
Very cool. Very cool.
So what are we covering today, Chris? It's time.
Today, we are excited to bring you our part 1 of Total Power, which is finally being released today. So as you're listening to this podcast, it is being released. Because of that, we want to give you very fair warning.
Yes.
Spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. If you have not read Total Power yet, stop listening. Go and read it, order it, audiobook it, whatever, binge it, and then come back to us. If you have read the book, then enjoy this first podcast. So yeah, we're going to be doing a little bit different format this month because it's such a new book. We wanted to try something out new. Part 1 is going to be the first half of the book, where we're sort of going to intermix plot summary along with our themes and winners and losers. And then next week we'll drop part 2, and it'll be sort of the same. And then we'll wrap it up with our overall winners and losers and our rating. And so we figured we'd do that since it was a new book, give people a chance to, read, listen to something, and then read some more and finish it up. So yeah, and if you guys like that, we could keep rolling with that style. So yeah, that's Total Power. We're excited to talk with you.
Yeah, and chapter 20 is where we decided to cut our 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. So if you have just picked up the book, as soon as you get through chapters 1 through 20, feel free to come back and join us for part 1. We won't be spoiling the second half of the book until next week with part 2.
Right.
All right, let's get into it.
All right, so looking on Goodreads, it's a very fresh book, only like under 200 reviews, but has a pretty high rating, 4.71, and the Goodreads summary is this. So in this next thriller by the number 1 New York Times best-selling author of the Mid-Trap series, it's a race against the clock when ISIS takes out the entire U.S. power grid and throws the country into chaos. That's actually the perfect summary for the first half, because we're going to be stopping right when the attack happens. So
Right when the country is thrown into chaos. The second half, I guess the middle part of the book and into the ending is the fallout of the attack, how America deals with this an attack of this nature, and how Mitch Rapp and crew deal with an attack of this nature once it happened, which is pretty unique for Mitch and Irene, a new situation for them.
Yeah, I just want to I don't know, we can kick it off with our overall theme of the first half or the first 20 chapters. And to me, what came to mind was this loss of control. And we don't often see Mitch not in the seat of control. So, and really, he lets this attack happens on his watch, and it happens because they messed up a little bit. So, yeah, I thought that this was a very interesting idea to put Mitch into that situation.
Yeah, definitely. And our main villain is the opposite end of that, where Mitch and Irene are usually masterminding the pace of the narrative, or they're in charge of and controlling the next steps, and that's what makes them so great at their job. They could see one step further, and that's how they always won in the end. This book, they can't see 5 minutes into the future without something unpredictable happening. So that loss of control absolutely applies to them. But the main villain, John Alton, or who we're going to see is nicknamed Power Station, he has that locus of control. We get inside his brain in a lot of these bureaucratic meetings, or even, we'll talk about in a few minutes, a scene in front of Congress. And that power dynamic is shifting away from Mitch and the team to Power Station and the villain. And we really see inside his brain how he's assuming control and he's planning out the events, and everything's going to happen according to his pacing. The reason our heroes are able to, save the day essentially, or do their job, is because he starts losing that control as well.
Right.
Yeah, so if we open the book, the first thing we see after the title page is a nice quick acknowledgments section. Kyle really took the time and thought about who his career in this book in particular is he's thankful for. And I don't know if you caught this, Chris, but he opens with his teacher, his first grade teacher.
Oh.
Yeah, Mrs. Burnside, as he says, who stoked his desperate need to know where Dick and Spot would run next, and his 7th grade librarian. So I thought that was a nice little shout to someone a little different, an educator.
A fellow teacher.
A fellow teacher of mine.
Maybe one day you will inspire someone geographically.
Maybe I taught the next writer of Mitch Rapp novels,
maybe
a long time down in the future here, book 64. And then we move to the author's note, kind of going back to that transfer of power early Vince style we talked about with Lethal Agent.
Same thing in Lethal Agent. Very similar thing to what we got in Lethal Agent.
Yeah, and this time Kyle writes, quote, "The most terrifying thing about writing this book was how little I had to make up. Between actual historical power outages, government assessments of power grid vulnerabilities, and official estimates of the casualties that a long-term outage would generate, much of the book wrote itself. Having said that, things like the details of how attacks would be carried out and specific locations of critical infrastructure have been purposefully obscured or fictionalized." Building the suspense, huh?
Yeah, and honestly, that was one of the main things what I liked about this book was the realness that it conveyed. I don't know, I'm a sucker. My other genre that I really like is, post-apocalyptic tales and any the Book of Eli movie or The Road, or that's pretty dark, but just like those kind, or the zombie Dawn of the Dead, or what's the one on AMC, the TV show, The Walking Dead.
World War Z. I never read that, but I hear it's good.
World War Z is good. Yes, just any of these apocalypse things. I really, I don't know. I don't know what that says about myself, but I enjoy the apocalypse movie. And this was interesting to see this in this style of book, because you bring in the whole thriller spy element to it, and then you also add this apocalypse element to it, and I like that blending, and that was one of the best things I liked in this entire novel, and especially the fact that, which brings us back to our theme, the loss of control, in terms of, again, Mitch let this happen, or I guess there's other people to blame too, but we don't often see the attacks happen, right?
The CIA failed, if not just Mitch, the whole apparatus.
The whole
failed.
government, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even consider that as one of the genres Kyle's crossing over and bringing into the thriller world. Because usually I think thrillers, okay, the biggest threat you're going to face is nuclear annihilation and whatever.
Right.
That's run of the mill, right? We stop the attack. The nuclear bombs don't kill everybody on the planet. And look, it's a thriller. It's suspenseful. Bringing in that apocalyptic genre, that dystopian genre a little bit here really puts this thriller in a category of its own. That's a creative blending I hadn't considered. And you're right, it fits our theme.
Yeah, because most time these books are, oh, there's a nuke that's going to come in, or this attack is going to happen, yada, yada, yada. And then most of the time, Mitch saves the day. I mean, there's like a couple instances where attacks do go off. Not all the time, but like that. Those are isolated incidents where hundreds of people are dying. In this case, thousands of people die right off the bat.
Yeah.
And it's like, not right off the bat, but like, very quickly. And Mitch has to work to like clean up the aftermath.
Yeah. And we'll probably get to it in the next episode because we're going to jump into the book.
All right. We're literally right off the bat, we're introduced to Sonia. And I kind of like this character, Mike. She's a Russian mole. She's sent to meet up with this mysterious guy in the middle of nowhere. She was told to do a bunch of research on the power grid. And she learns this pretty crazy information that this guy has extreme control of the power grid and that he wants to take it down, and he needs some operators, boots on the ground, and he thinks that Russia could be his source. So what did you think of the character of Sonia?
I thought a real great opening because this was the first part of the narrative. In the prelude, we opened with her driving through West Virginia, like you said, to meet this mysterious man who has some information. I kind of like it. Almost felt like we're opening in media res, kind of in the middle of something. Like, who is this?
Like a cold opening.
Yeah, exactly. Who is this Sonia? Where is she going? What? The Russians had a sleeper agent this whole time, just playing an average American. What is she, in her 30s or so? Late 30s, maybe?
Like coder, right? She does like code or works for a website or something like that. I forget.
Yeah, she's making her own way, working in computer software programming. And like, boom, why is Russia awakening this sleeper agent right now? And I just loved it. We were kind of dropped right into the mystery of a story that seemed like it was already well developed in a paragraph. Right. I already felt like this story has been happening and in motion the whole time. And we're dropped into it as the reader. So I like that. And I liked her as a character throughout the whole story.
And then we quickly transition to our guy, Mitch, who is in Spain and obviously trying to search down the remnants of ISIS after Scott so conveniently killed Halabi for him while he was in the hospital. And we get one quote or one quick sentence where Rap coughs and he like keeps checking for blood, which he noticed that he hasn't done it for quite some time, but it was a nice like reintroduction into Rap because he was still in the hospital when we last left him, but now he's back. He's caked in dirt, trying to kick some ISIS badass, or trying to be a badass and kick some ISIS ass. There we go. But yeah, and then immediately we find information that we now know who is running ISIS in Halabi's absence, and that there is this tech guy called Hamal Katan who is going to be traveling on a plane through Spain to go to the U.S. to meet with somebody. And Rab is very intrigued by this. Why is this guy going to the U.S.?
Yeah. And right before we get into the intelligence on the new ISIS leadership, you're right about Rap still feeling the symptoms of being sick with that little cough. Kyle also gives us an update on the U.S. political system. I don't know about you, but at the end of Lethal Agent, with Christine Barnett being told to take the pills and commit suicide, I was wondering, what does that mean for the election? What does that mean for the next president? And while we don't necessarily get a lot of information right now, Kyle does tell us a relatively unknown quantity won. So we have a president-elect. The polls showed that more than half of America would have preferred another election, but there was no constitutional basis or mechanism to invalidate the results of the election. So we have this unknown quantity who filled in after the lead candidate, Christine Barnett, committed suicide. And I'm just like, November 2020 in the real America is kind of scaring me a little bit. I'm a little nervous for the turbulence that our country is going to feel with our current political climate and current social fabric of America. And here's Kyle explaining to us there's a contested election that more than half of Americans want to throw the results out of, and the president-elect, more than half of Americans don't want him, but there's no constitutional mechanism to undo an election, if you will. I'm like, holy cow, Kyle, like that's heavy stuff that I'm a little nervous this country might have to grapple with in just the next 2 months in the real world.
It's a very subtle way of putting our current situation into the novels. You know, it's a very, without blatantly doing it. Yeah, it was nice. Nice touch.
So yeah, Rap is getting debriefed, and I think Claudia is doing the debriefing, and everyone's in the room. We have the whole team. I think Coleman's there, and Wick is there, and who else is with them? Maslick is there, and they're all hearing about, from Jordi Cardenas, the Spanish chief of intelligence, debriefing them about this plane. And I don't know. I wanted a little more. It kind of made me think of, like, you know, in Star Wars, how Rogue One took this little nugget of somehow to start A New Hope, they had the Death Star plans. And for a while, fans never knew where the Death Star plans came from. And is it Rogue One, that end scene?
Yeah, Rogue One.
It's Rogue One, that famous Vader scene, where we realize how they hijacked and got the plans out and passed it along to the rebellion. Here, I'm like, how do we have all this intelligence on ISIS? Like, who collected it? Who's Hamal Katan? Who is, I think there's another guy named Nahas who's taken over after Halabi, General Nahas. And so we seem to just get a load of information about the ISIS power structure. And I just feel like that could be a fun little short story to find out who's collecting that information. How'd the Spanish get it even?
To me, this scene followed quickly by, you know, them letting the targets through the airport with their weapons and then allowing them to be on the airplane. There's they're pretty sure there's Hamal, two people with him. So they're like Pakistani guy who they're not quite sure about, but his actions are almost positive that he's not with them. And then to follow that up with the scenes where they're on the plane and then you realize that the plane was just a whole diversion full of operators. That reminded me, it was so much like a Mission Impossible type narrative. It reminded me of like Mitrap could have been Ethan Hunt in that situation, you know?
Yeah.
Not like he's a little bit more, Mitrap is a little bit more of a badass than Ethan Hunt, but I mean, I love Ethan Hunt, but yeah, that was an awesome little like Mission Impossible meets Vince Flynn in that whole thing. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And I liked hearing about in this room where they're getting the intelligence, they're bouncing ideas off of one another and they're trying to plan how to do this takedown. So they have to take Hamal Katan. He's the ISIS top technology guy, and he's going to some meeting where they know there's some information that would lead to an attack being transferred. And so why is this guy being flown into the U.S.? But if they snatch him, the ISIS network will go into hiding. They'll never be able to uncover the plan and intercept it. So they can't take him. They can't snatch him. They can't show that they're being suspicious. And they also just can't shoot it down because they need the information. They need to know why he's traveling, who sent him, and who he's going to meet. And so they're going back and forth about the plan. Rap says, what if we just take them down at security? And Bruno McGraw says, their network's going to find out. They're going to scatter. Rap says, right. Or somebody says, it's not clear who. He says, so we're going to get on a plane with an unknown number of terrorists carrying an unknown number of weapons and try to take them alive? That about covers it. Bullets and planes don't mix, Coleman pointed out. Remember Azerbaijan? Rap remembered it a little too vividly. I gotta be honest, I don't remember Azerbaijan. What's Coleman referencing there?
No, I like the bullets and planes don't mix. But yeah, no, the whole sequence of like them figuring that out and then actually pulling off the plan. Like you have,
Yeah.
because you don't know that the plane is full of other operatives from various different, like the guy who breaks his arm or dislocates his arm is like one of the Japanese from the Japanese intelligence service, and then this other random person who we meet who ends up punching Hamal in the face, and that was just great. I instantly thought of Mission Impossible when I was reading this stuff.
I was a little confused as the plane scene was going down, and I'm slowly piecing together like, oh, all these are planted intelligence operatives. And to show diversity on the plane so it looked like a normal crew, we contracted and worked with other intelligence services that we're allies with, and they're all in on the game. And the only ones on this entire passenger plane who are not in on the secret are the terrorists. Yeah. And I just, as you're piecing that together,
and
it
the
was
one
like
Pakistani.
a puzzle. Yeah, and that innocent guy who they weren't sure about. But as we're piecing that together as a reader, I was just doing like loops in my mind. What's going on here? It kind of was fuzzy. And then you put that together with some comedic relief. My favorite was because Charlie Wicker is a little shorter, right? That's always mentioned in the book as the sniper. His stature's a little smaller. He can conceal himself well. His disguise, because they're all technically undercover on a wacky operation like this. His disguise, I forget how he's described, but, as a homosexual, very flamboyant, his dress and everything about him.
Like tight yellow pants, right?
Bright pants. They give him, I think, piercings, too, in weird places. And they put him next to one of these ISIS terrorists, one of these guys who probably has this super fundamentalist worldview who would hate everything about that lifestyle. And the terrorist doesn't even know that this little guy next to him dressed up like this is going to kill him.
Yeah. No, that was awesome.
And he accidentally does kill him. Mitch starts yelling at Wick. He's like, we needed the guy alive. And I think Wick's like, sorry, Mitch. I slipped.
Yeah, no, when you were saying that, like, it got a little fuzzy, like, I had to reread the whole portion of when, like, it goes from, the lady, like, dropping some shit on the floor from her overhead bag, yes. And then Rap, like, then I was like, oh, wait, was that supposed to happen, or was that fake? And then it cuts black, and then in the next chapter, we get to see them. He shows them that, like, our Fred Mason the pilot was causing that stuff to happen. And it was almost like you hit action and everyone stops. Because Rap even they even say like, oh, like a couple rows up, there's a bunch of like some random country or might have said like people from the Netherlands or Swedish, like people were being a little ruckus. And it's obviously those are people from like the Swedish intelligence service
operatives
playing the part,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that scene.
Yeah, that scene was a lot of fun. For as confusing and wacky as it was, it had the payoff. Because even operationally, it was so sound. Because hearkening back to Coleman's Bullets and Airplanes Don't Mix a few chapters earlier, you're like, why did Rap fire the gun during all this commotion into the roof? And he aimed particularly at the luggage rack. Well, it turns out, and I don't know how Kyle thought of this,
or forced the guy to aim.
He grabbed the arm and in the struggle forced the bullet to go at the luggage racks, which they lined with Kevlar so that it wouldn't damage the fuselage and actually make Fred Mason's job even harder of landing the planes safely. But why they needed that was they had somebody filming who they played off as just another passenger, but that film was going to be proof that there was no funny business. If there's a film of a struggle aboard an airplane and these terrorists actually shot a bullet on an airplane and there's cell phone footage of it, it proves that the plane crashed, all the ISIS guys are dead, there's no way they're going to be captured and give up their secrets. And so the rest of the world saw this footage and assumed ISIS attacked and there was a struggle, the plane went down, we lost everybody, it's a tragedy. And meanwhile, ISIS wouldn't hide their plans and go undercover or duck out, because ISIS thinks their guys are dead. So they would never consider that Hamal Katan gave up information because he's dead.
It's a good way to serve like two purposes. So
yeah, I mean, but as we know, Fred Mason is secretly landing the plane somewhere in the the Sierra Madre, in one of the mountain ranges over southern Spain, and they're all alive, and they will take at least Hamal Katan. I don't think was anybody else left alive. I think one other terrorist might have been left alive, but they get the information.
But we see Marcus Dumont in the field.
Yes.
Who is not happy being in the field. And I like the one part was he's like, because Rap threatens to like light his hair on fire, or I think he even does. He's like, the last thing I need is to smell like burning hair on this airplane before I puke. And then finally, before he gives him the password, Rap threatens to like cut out one of his testicles, I think, and Marcus is like, please, I don't want to see that. Just give him the password.
That's right. Oh, no, he's not just going to cut it off. He threatens to
with a
saw
spoon,
off
with a
the
spoon.
dude's testicle with a spoon in front of Marcus.
Yeah. That Maslick throws at him after eating like some airplane spaghetti or something like that.
He tosses him the spoon. Oh, yeah, that's classic.
I would love to see these as a movie, because some of those scenes in the dialogue in like a movie, I would love to see someone portray like Marcus, and like that's just like a good movie scene. You know?
Oh yeah.
Something that you would want to show on screen.
Listen to this though. I just found it, and this is rare. I usually don't have my copy of the book as we record, but I'm flipping through it here, as you might be able to hear. On page 55, Rap turned toward the galley where Joe Maslick was wolfing down what looked like a plate of cannelloni. Maz, give me that spoon. No! Catan shouted. Stop! Why would they tell me his name? I don't know anything kind of gig. And then when Catan didn't answer, a tomato sauce covered spoon came flying through the air. Rap caught it without taking his eyes off the man. America's power grid, Catan blurted out as his eyes locked on the plastic utensil. Dude doesn't want his balls cut off with a spoon.
No, he doesn't. I wouldn't either.
Oh, man. That's gold.
So, while all of this is happening, in intermittent chapters, we have two things that happen. One, Sonia goes to Russia and relays to the Russian president, Boris Utkin, and the intel head about the information that she gained from who we learned is Power Station. They ultimately decide to do nothing. That they're like, oh, we're going to use this information sort of, if it does happen, we'll move some stuff around so we can better position ourselves afterwards, and that she's worried she's going to die, but she's just sent home to, continue being the sleeper agent. As well, we then have a follow-up with John Alton, who is sitting in a congressional meeting, scoffing at these politicians who, call him a, worrywart or doomsdayers, or, just this guy, John Alton, seems very, at this moment, very quickly we learn that he is the same guy from the first chapter, because he says, like, at the very end of the first chapter in there that, oh, you're going to see what I'm going to do to your power grid, and then it sort of like clicks two and two together.
Yeah.
But you can see that John Alton is a very smart guy. He figured all this stuff out. He doesn't give a crap about talking back to some politicians in a congressional hearing.
Yeah.
And that these guys, it brings me back to what we were talking about earlier in a previous pod about how they're like, oh, we can't do this. It's going to cost so much money, and this is never going to happen. And it just reminds me of the things that, I guess the same thing with the pandemic, with what we're doing now. And you could tie this back to Lethal Agent. Like, you don't want to pay for it. Hindsight's 20/20, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to pay for it, but then if it happens, you wish you had it, type thing.
This congressional scene, though, it takes, here's another angle that I liked about it. So Alton is hired, we learn, by Janice Crane at the Department of Energy, their Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response. And she actually contracted him to put together a report for the Department of Energy to present to Congress about America's vulnerabilities on the power grid. So he literally was handed the access, right, to do this report. He was authorized to audit different power companies. He was authorized to access their systems so that he could summarize in the report how we needed to upgrade infrastructure and software. And so we learn he is like the country's top leader of power issues and infrastructure. And he basically knows the ins and outs across the country of every power grid. And so that's setting us up for him to play a unique role, because later on we learn, or not too far on, we're going to hear, while he was doing that report, gaining access and learning about all the regional systems around the country, he was secretly planting malware.
Well, and then that malware in the beginning wasn't malicious.
No.
It was like it was like what, like my university does phishing scams against us, just to like not scams, but sends us phishing emails, and then if we click on it, they're like, "Ooh, gotcha!" Like this was an attempt, and it's very similar. He was just probing to see the weaknesses, and then he realized how deep he could get, and he was like, "I got something here." Very opportunistic.
Yeah, it's also like Sonya, right? The Russians had a sleeper agent in the country, and they awoke her to get involved in this plot. He was kind of setting all this malware just initially to have a back door, kind of just because I can. He's like this jackass who just, because I can, I'm going to one-up you right now. And slowly having all this power given to him by the government, by being hired to be the government's source on this, he realizes he can collect that power a lot more quickly. And so planning this malware allows him to say, I can take control here. I can, and I like the psychology of Alton. Quote, Alton didn't bother to hide his widening grin. These people were complete fucking idiots. And worse, they were complete fucking idiots who thought they were geniuses. The most dangerous kind, but just the kind the American people love to vote for. And then Congressman Graves responds, everything's a disaster to you people. You're a regulator, so you regulate. You create these wild scenarios and tell us that everyone's going to die so you can expand your own authority. Alton let out a low groan. What a load of horseshit. And then a little later on in the hearing, quote, Alton watched silently, happy to finally get a little entertainment about being stuck in this hearing all day. Humans really were just monkeys throwing around feces. They'd grandstand for a while, and then make a few backroom deals that led to absolutely no action at all. You could bring a human to water, but you couldn't make him drink. Here's something I thought about in that scene. He's sitting there as like a backbencher scoffing. He's not even the one in the hot seat at the congressional hearing. He's snickering in the background about every time one of these congressmen says something dumb that he thinks is stupid. Like, oh, you're not going to spend money to fix the grid? And he calls him out. He's like, who is this guy sitting over there? What's with that smirk? Wipe it off your face. And so that's just further emboldening Alton to put this plan in motion. He's got the power, and now he's getting ticked off by the people in government who are just kind of mocking him. And it made me think, it's like Mitch hanging around in all these meetings, letting the bureaucrats talk. It's just like Tutwiler. Attorney General Tutwiler in Transfer of Power. Mitch was standing off to the side. Irene's like, don't say anything, stay in the corner. We didn't know who he was. And that's when he comes onto the scene. He bursts out and gives her the business and gives her the rundown. Well, it's the opposite with the villain doing that. He's sitting there getting mad at the bureaucrats, and all of a sudden he busts out and goes on a rant about the power grid and how vulnerable it is. And it was funny seeing that from inside a villain's mind, not inside our hero, Mitch Rapp's mind.
Whoa, that's a very direct comparison.
It's meta.
Yeah, because how many times have we seen Mitch sit into either a congressional hearing or a meeting with a bunch of politicians and do the exact same thing that John Alton did?
Exactly.
Wow, that's crazy. I never thought about that, but that is crazy.
Right?
I like that. But so this is a guy who, it's mentioned all his life, he has everything. He was always like never wanted, or like never satisfied. Like, people in school didn't like him, but he was like always smarter than people. He could never like get the girl because he was never like satisfied with them.
But he pretends to be a player all the time.
Right.
Mr. Smooth Talker. He tries to get Sonya even at the house.
Yeah, he tries to he's like, oh, this will be a nice add-on bonus.
But it's just awkward. It's like, dude, you're not going to get her, and you're probably not going to get anybody. So he's very much this isolated loser.
It's interesting to me because he's an interesting villain because while he's super intelligent, and I think his plan, for the most part, we can pick our nits later. for the most part, was very smart and very well drawn out. But at the same time, he's like half of a smart villain, you know? Like half of him is really smart. The other half is pompous idiot.
Yeah.
You know, he's almost like a combination of, from the last book that we did, Third Option. Not the last book, but the last book in the series we did, The Third Option. Combination of Hank Clark and his... Oh, why am I blanking on his operative right now?
Oh, yeah. Who did he? The professor, Cameron, Peter Cameron.
There we go. Peter Cameron, thank you.
They were also very aloof, thought they were really good, but they're like, I really want to go kill somebody, but they think they're like a super assassin, and they've never. No,
it's almost like you combine those two ideas together, because Hank Clark is very much a strong villain, right?
And
he
smart,
knows everything,
manipulative,
and smart, manipulative.
Like all.
But then Peter Cameron was, you know, you could say like half smart, but very naive and but eager, like wanted to kill.
Yeah,
it's like you combine those two villains together. That's like almost perfect. Why we just read that, because I thought of it. But yeah,
that's really good right there. I like that. And to back up everything you're saying, just listen to these quotes from that congressional meeting. We really hear inside Alton's mind about his motivations for this. He says, quote, "He could still remember the exact moment in his life he had been transformed. 2 years into the project, being a researcher for the government, he managed to get a worm to spread through more than half the country's power companies. It was in that split second that he realized he could do it. He had the access and tools to put the whole of America in the dark and keep it there. With little more than a wave of his hand, he could send the world's most formidable country back to the 18th century." Like, this plan is just forming in his mind, and he's just getting sucked in to the power that he realizes he can wield. Later on, a few chapters later, it even says, quote, "Power was a narcotic, though. Watching that man in the parking lot die and knowing it had happened because of a phone call he made was an incredible rush, a sensation that he had the ability to multiply 1,000,000 times over. Not only did he possess the most devastating weapon in the history of the human race, but he had the ability to actually use it. Not like the nukes that had become a little bit more than tedious theater, or the bioweapons that no one really had the guts to deploy. This was real. And he's in charge." Something else that emboldens him is actually being in or at least watching the action go down at the diner scene. So John Alton was kind of like sitting up on a mountaintop. He had a scope. I believe he had a rifle as well. And the thrill of actually seeing the ISIS operatives, eventually the Russians don't take his bait and want to work with him, but he does. And it's funny, he's just kind of texting ISIS and he's getting mad at them. And he's actually a racist, right? He's saying all these Islamophobic,
very much so racist.
Yeah, these Islamophobic things, but he's trying to court ISIS. He's like, you idiots in your way of life, but he's also trying to get them to do his dirty work. And that's just another narcotic that's feeding into his drive and ambition for power.
I think to bring in our theme again of this loss of control, we progressively see him lose control throughout this entire novel. And he craves control, he wants control, but he ultimately it's a slippery slope of him losing it.
Yep. And it's funny, he's losing control as that thirst for power overtakes him. It's like the ring, right? It's Gollum in Lord of the Rings. As soon as even a hobbit succumbs to the power of the ring, that thirst for power will grow exponentially, and everything about you will degrade. And so John Alton's faculties of being a mastermind, being really smart, is degrading because power is taking over. And so his plan is slowly going to erode and crumble.
Yeah. Yeah, so why are we at the diner? We're at the diner because Mitch was able to find out through the information in Spain that there was going to be this meeting with this power station guy. And he wants to use this meeting to potentially, figure out, scope it out, and crash it. And he's there, and we get to meet a character that we've met before, briefly, I think, in a couple other, maybe one or two other novels. But we meet B.B. Kincaid, who was there along with Rapp in the motel across the street doing surveillance for this potential meeting between Power Station and ISIS. And it's during the scene at the motel where shit starts to hit the fan. And he realizes after 30 minutes of past when the time was supposed to meet, something's wrong, and tells BB to get out of there. And obviously Alton didn't believe the whole airplane story, and immediately thought, because he knew that his operatives were going to be traveling from Spain, that they obviously got someone on that flight. CIA's involved, or the feds are involved, whatever, and tipped them off. And what ensues in this whole scene, this is one of my favorite scenes of the novel in terms of just the action and Rapp. You know, he knows that as soon as he comes out of that hotel, he's going to be marked, because just the way he's built, obviously, and these people obviously know who he is, or know what a person like him looks like him is going to do. So as soon as he emerges from that hotel, he puts himself in danger, and then he knows that they also want to go out in a blaze of glory.
Yep.
So all those civilians that are in that diner are he has to save them. So
and BB sees an assault rifle. One of them grab out of the truck, and
right.
BB's like, "Rapp, gun!" And that's when he guns it. He comes on in. So yeah, it's about to go down.
Yeah, and I am bringing this back to another movie and another scene, but this reminded me of a scene from Jack Reacher. This whole diner scene. But there's a very similar scene with like a diner, and Reacher comes in, and it's instead of ISIS, it's like racist cops. But yeah, anyways, this is just another very good movie scene that you would want to capture on the screen. I felt like, but yeah, Rapp gets hit.
Yeah,
but he doesn't give up.
Yeah, he jumps behind a truck, and thankfully the truck is loaded with fertilizer, which takes a lot of the bullets, so it doesn't rip through the frame and the body of the truck. But he gets hit in is it the side or the leg?
Yeah, I think the side.
I think it's his side, but he still manages to get inside the diner, finish off one of the operatives right before I think he was about to shoot an innocent bystander.
He did shoot. There was one casualty.
Yeah. Although by this time Power Station already tipped off ISIS to get away, and the main leader who we're looking for, Nahas at this time, I think, he was inbound for the meeting, and the two guys that Rapp is dealing with and just took out are actually just the scouts. And so Muhammad Nahas is still on his way. He turns it around, hightails it out, and that's when we get Rapp calling in for Coleman to make the intercept. And is it Fred Mason again with the helicopter? They got a helicopter, they got Coleman, and they want to intercept the van that the ISIS leader is hightailing it out of there on.
I will say just to bring it back up, the badass thing of that scene was BB running over one of the operatives right before they were about to shoot Rapp. That was one of the sickest things.
She does kill one in the parking lot.
You see the headlights, and the next thing you know, you see her like grabbing over it. That was pretty badass.
Yeah, that's right. She does kill one of them with the truck, and that's when Rapp runs inside to take the other guy before he can do more damage. Pretty decent scene, and when they get to the van, Rapp realizes they're wearing ski masks, and they're trying to figure out why. And I forget, is it Bruno who's operating with Rapp at the van? It's Maz.
It's Maz.
Maz and Rapp are trying to get to this van and attack it, and right as they're about to move in, Rapp senses something's wrong. Why are they wearing ski masks? And then he also says,
why are they staying inside?
Why are they staying at the van? If they wanted to escape, they would be in the forest, because they can get lost in the forest, and Rapp's ready to chase them into the forest. Well, he realizes last second, I think right as they're charging the van, these guys, they want to go down in a blaze of glory. They're going to blow this thing up and try to take out as many people around it as they can, including Rapp, and they blow it up. But the fact that they concealed their identity is important, because it proves to Rapp that Nahas is still out there. They wanted it to seem like he died in the explosion, so that, the entire country would say, or the CIA would say, oh, he's dead, the ISIS leadership is gone, we don't have to target him anymore. But they don't know who died in the explosion. They don't know if Nahas was there or not, and it turns out he wasn't.
Yeah, and I think even as Rapp is bleeding out on the helicopter back, he says, get the FBI to identify those guys, and then immediately Mass has to call in an ambulance to get him some blood back into him, because he was doing that whole thing, the chase and the helicopter scene
while he's bleeding out.
While I was bleeding out.
Came close on the helicopter. He was in a daze for sure.
So then we cut to an interesting scene. I'm interested to talk to you about this one, Martini, in terms of Alton, having tipped off Nahas, now meets with him and another guy who is Faisal Ibrahim, and it explains the entire attack, what he needs done. Also explains these heart rate monitors, which are a key element of the story, and how they work, and how it's sort of his, insurance. How once the attack goes off, you can't kill me, because if you kill me, then that I can reverse the attack with this little piece of code. Almost like a MacGuffin, I guess. And then, out of nowhere, Alton has the balls to stab the leader of ISIS and kill him and take control. At one point, I liked it. I liked this idea, but I also just couldn't see Alton doing this, though.
Yeah, he's by no means a trained operative or an assassin in any way. But at the same time, he knows getting in bed with ISIS puts him at a disadvantage, because these guys, as we saw, Saeed Halabi has built up, are Western trained, Western educated. He knows this wave of ISIS operatives are going to be smart enough to mastermind him, and once the grid goes down, he knows he's going to be useless. So I kind of buy into this idea of he's afraid of having ISIS leadership take over, and all he was the brains of the operation. Once he hands over their plans and tells them what to do, he realizes he's toast. So the heart rate monitor, this insurance policy, it worked. If they torture him and his heart rate goes too high, it will trigger a release of documents to the CIA. The U.S. will automatically get intelligence on everything about how to get the grid back up and running. All the malware he installed, all the substations they hit and plan to hit, all the diversions of energy that overloaded transformers, they'll get it all so they can undo it. And same thing if his heart rate goes to 0 if he's dead. So I kind of buy that as an insurance policy to keep ISIS from hurting him, so that he can still have the upper hand. Did they need to kill off Nahas? Maybe, because Faisal Ibrahim, who he works with, is ISIS's second-rate technology guy. Remember, Hamal Katan was killed in the airplane and the interrogation. And so this is the second-rate technology guy for ISIS and a couple of foot soldiers. I think Alton can keep the upper hand over a crew like that, where if Alton had to deal with the leader of ISIS, who knows what the CIA has on him? Who knows how the CIA is tracking him? But I think Alton realizes it's a little safer to just work with this tech nerd and a couple ISIS foot soldiers who will listen to him.
I guess in the moment, I was fine with it. But then, as you further develop this villain, it didn't fit the bill. Yeah, maybe we can talk about this later. But how he spirals into being the villain that he is in the end, this scene just didn't. And maybe it just shows how much of a fall he will eventually have. I guess, I don't know. This, again, we can talk about this tomorrow. But I feel like there's two different villains in Alton. There is the smart one, and then there's the inexperienced, sort of, I'm here flying by the seat of my pants. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm very eager. I'm very naive. Yeah. But then the other half of him, it's almost like a Two-Face type thing.
Yeah. So, well, it's like you said. It's Senator Hank Clark from Third Option and the Professor. It's those two sides.
In that move, it's like Hank Clark move.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the novel
is the Professor.
Yeah, he's the Professor.
Well, speaking of this part of Alton's plan and how it's progressing, I was a little shocked that, so here's this guy with this intelligence. He shopped around, he says, with the Chinese, I believe with the Iranians. We know he's contacted the Russians, which will end up being part of the story later on. But now he's talking to ISIS, and he's just texting. Like, literally, he's texting at some points the head of ISIS.
I think it's like more of a secure communication text, but yeah.
I'm sure it is. But just the fact I'm saying he's made contact and shopped around with all of these different major geopolitical players, how the heck can he still be so confident nobody's onto him? That nobody in the whole global and American security and intelligence apparatus isn't onto him at all. I just thought it was a little nonchalant how he's talking to the Russians and he's talking to the Chinese and he's shopping with ISIS. I don't know.
I think that ultimately leads to his hubris and his downfall, like, because he is an idiot in that sense, right? You know, I feel like, again, the better version of this is him to be like we were talking about this the other day, where the better version of him is to be like the troll and Nicholas in like the Brad Thor novels, who has this superior knowledge of electronics and computer skills, right? But wouldn't just come out in the open and start emailing, you know, oh, let me email all of America's like enemies, and then I'm going to meet with them in person.
Hey, SVR, do you want to come wake up a Russian sleeper mole and I'll just meet with her? You know, like, I don't know. Is that how he would make contact?
But I guess for the SVR to awake a Russian sleeper mole, it had to have been like some sort of credible intel.
They must have sensed he's a professional in some regard. The way he
went wrong. His ultimate downfall is going to meet her himself.
That's true, because she identifies him later on at the congressional hearing on the news. Yeah, she sees him just sitting in the background. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot else going on in the background, if you will, during all of this. We actually cut to a couple of White House scenes around chapter 13 of the book, and we do see President Alexander assembling his crew, getting the updates from Kennedy saying, we've got this terrorist in Spain. We've learned that there's some sort of plan in the works. We got him, or Mitch and his spoon and testicle threatening, got him to admit it's the power grid that they're going to hit, and there's a guy with information who approached them about getting some ISIS guys to help him take out parts of the power grid. And the president and his group start playing out scenarios saying, what if? And they're really, I feel like here the plot is ramping up. This is that like rising action in the plot structure of, all right, the U.S. has the intelligence. That was the opening scene. Now that they have the intelligence, what the heck are we going to do if this whole thing goes down? And we're inside the White House with a very seasoned veteran of FEMA, T.J. Burton. What'd you think of him as he's addressing the president and this group is trying to work out what would happen if our grid does go down and stays down?
Honestly, the best part of that chapter was, you know, where sort of Rapp's internal monologue there, where he says T.J. Burton is one of the, you know, smartest, most competent men that he knew. And at first, he's asked the question, and he's like, I don't know, or we'd have no plan. And then Alexander's like, I pay you to have a plan. And Rapp in his mind's like, he's definitely thought about it. He has something. And then immediately, like, you know, whatever seconds, whatever later, he's like, well, this is what would happen. And then he literally lays out all of, you know, the things that you would need to do. And, like, you know, this is what's going to happen. 90% of, and then you have to be, like, he just laid it out. You have to become a dictator.
Yeah.
You have to figure out water. You can't let politicians get in the way. Like, you know, and he's like, this is all stuff that I've thought about while mowing his lawn or something, you know, ideas that he's concocted is if this had happened. And that's literally showing what Rapp's assessment of him, because Rapp knew that this guy he's not a slouch. He cared about his country. He, you know, put his work as the head of FEMA. That was my favorite part of the scene when he's like going over what exactly the president would need to do. Yeah.
And that's pretty scary what he's laying out. They even make it clear he's got tons of experience in national emergencies, They even quote him working in sub-Saharan Africa and Southern Asia and all sorts of disasters. And he has been like the point person to coordinate international and domestic responses to these disasters. And if he's the most seasoned man for that, and he literally goes, I would have no clue how we get through this. You know, if the grid goes out across America and 100% of the country and it lasts a full year, heck, if it lasts a month or two, even FEMA and everything we've stockpiled wouldn't get us through it. So
yeah,
pretty shocking moment. They even, I think Irene meets with Alton. They bring him in and say, well, we have an expert who knows the power grid. Let's pick his
Janice,
brain. Yeah, let's bring it brings in Janice from the Department of Energy, who also brings in Alton. And that was kind of cool, thinking loss of control. So far, all we know about Alton, he's in perfect control of the mission. He's confident in his own mind. He's in perfect control of his plans. When he gets called down to the CIA headquarters, he recognizes he's meeting with Irene Kennedy, the head of the CIA. And she's like, we know something's going to happen. You're the expert. Can you fill us in? He wants to give her just enough to let her know let her think he's being helpful. But at the same time, he doesn't want to give her enough to foil his plan. He's even like, so what? If the CIA catches a couple of these ISIS operatives trying to shoot up a transformer or two, doesn't matter. We'll go hit the other transformers. He's even calculated we only need to hit these 9 nodes, these 9 substations that interconnect regional grids. And he's like, fine, I'll give Irene 2 or 3 of them. What, they'll catch the terrorists, but I'll still be able to take down the other 80% of the grid. His plan is starting to unravel bit by bit.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. This whole sequence of... Because originally he says that he was going to do this attack during the summer, because doing it during the summer in the heat where... One, Americans are more likely to venture outside, not want to stay inside, which would lead to more unrest. 2, there's no, during the summer, when you have these fires that are going to ensue from the overloading the system and overloading the power lines, when you have the dry part of the summer, like the fires just are exacerbated. And then 3, he wanted to be in the summer, this nice scene where he's sipping champagne in this perfect little area overlooking DC.
Yeah.
And then he ends up having to do it in the middle of the winter. But yeah, no, this is total loss of control.
Yeah.
But he realizes that he can't like be like, oh, do these 9 substations when they're like, she's smart enough. He realizes that Irene is smart enough to pick through his bullshit.
Yeah.
So,
He can't pull one over on her. He can't give her false information that doesn't actually make a difference. He has to give her enough that makes her think they might be successful.
Which then really like highlights, again, this duality of villains, because in this moment, he's very smart.
He's smart enough to outwit Irene. Like, that's something. That really, really is something.
And Rapp doesn't catch on to him that he's being this Weasley guy, like... Because I would imagine that sitting in that room, he obviously he notices Rapp. Yeah. He doesn't know his name, but he notices like, oh, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And then like later on, he realizes that this guy is not someone to mess with.
Irene's right-hand man.
Yeah. And so, but he's able to exude calm and give enough information to pull one over on Rapp and Irene.
Which is kind of crazy because... Thinking back to our last episode where we dug into all the research around America's real power grid, well, not only is Kyle using that and being really honest and down to earth about our real vulnerabilities, he's created a villain who literally is the expert. He is the country's and maybe the world's top expert on power authorities. He's been authorized by the government to research and access all of this. We were talking about Dr. Pry, who leads this EMP task force and advises Congress and advises different parts of the executive branch on how to protect our vulnerabilities. Is someone like Dr. Pry in the real world? They have all this information. They seem to be very smart and intelligent. But Kyle takes that and makes them the villain right under the government's eyes. They granted them all this power. I couldn't help thinking, like,
even paid him millions of dollars to do it.
exactly, he's getting millions of dollars to work as a government contractor. What if, think about it, what if the Russians, the Chinese, ISIS, whoever, wanted to contract someone to figure out the best way to launch an EMP attack and or other sort of communications grid attack on America? I would want that guy Pry. I would literally want him. I would want him on my side if I were planning an attack because he's the top guy. Well, we're getting that with Alton here. He is the top guy, and he's also the mastermind.
Yes. So after we get Alton interacting with the CIA, we get two scenes that I kind of like. They were sort of breaking up the action in terms of we have Sonia who breaks into Alton's house, and she has some skills, Mike. She's been a sleeper agent for some time, but she's able to get into his house. She brought in some cleaning supplies to disguise as a maid. There's no obvious sensors that she knows of, and she's able to go around. She hooks up a hard drive, and then boom, he comes home. But she quickly has quick thinking, knocks over a stack of books to make it seem like a motion sensor went off, hides under the bed, and he leaves. And she's able to escape with sort of half a hard drive. And I like this, like she's sort of building up this character a little bit. And we see Sonia 5 to 6 chapters and just building her up a little bit. I hope that this character stays and we see her more in the future. But yeah, she has some skills as some spycraft.
She does. Quick thinking on her feet. And it's pretty funny, though. She unplugs the hard drive when it's only, 70% downloaded off Alton's computer. And later on, after she rendezvous with Rapp, we're going to see down the road, she's like, oh, yeah, I mean, I don't know much about this Alton guy. He talked to me. He showed me his plans. Well, do you have his plans? No, I unplugged the hard drive and it was 70% done downloading. And she thinks, like, it's not going to have any information. And Marcus is like, what?
Give it to me.
Yeah. Come on. That's huge.
And then the other scene that we get that I really liked, which was very brief, but it's just, Mitch, it's funny because it harkens back to a scene in Lethal Agent where he had to change his bunker to be better for a bio attack. Now he has to change it back for this electrical attack and to store more food. And then we cut to this very quick scene where they've set up the barn that Anna has all her farm animals, which now he's happy that he has the farm animals so he can kill them.
Last book he was talking about eating curry vindaloo or something with her lamb, and now it's like, crap, they might have to do that.
Exactly. And we see it's another little tidbit for serious book readers. These characters that come back from the past. We have good old Skip McMahon, our favorite FBI field agent.
Second favorite to Mark Beeman.
Oh, true. Second favorite. and we have Mike Nash's wife, who I don't know why we don't get Mike Nash because he was one of my favorite characters, and I really wish they would bring him back. I just finished The Last Man, Vince's last book, and he's kind of in the doghouse. Irene is kind of shitting on him and backbenching him while they're in Afghanistan. And so I was trying to think, like, what happens between then and now that he's not in Manassas at this meeting, but his wife is there. I was trying to think, like, is he just working? He's still at the CIA, right? Well, that's the thing. Like, he was being groomed to be... I thought he was being groomed to be the next Irene. Because obviously they're pulling him out of the field. Or if not the next Irene, potentially maybe even the president. Because... they gave him this, Medal of Honor. Yeah. And he was now going to be the front man, the main liaison between the CIA, between the CIA and the White House to have the, because he's compromised, can't be a field agent. I thought he was going to be Irene's protege.
Same.
And we haven't seen him since, really.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Does Kyle deal with him at any other point in his first couple books? Because I forgot reading Last Man. Irene kind of puts him in the doghouse and, it's like, go push pencils or go do your work. And he questions her at one point, which I thought would have been a good quality. Like, you want that person on your staff who puts you in check when you're a leader so that you don't go too fast and make missteps. But I didn't get that sense. And to think it was Vince's last book, I was like, I forgot. Is that how we leave Nash, with him kind of being given the back seat by Irene at the CIA?
I have to go back to Survivor and see how he's brought up in there.
Same. I forgot it.
And ever since you told me that Extreme Measures was supposed to be a Mike Nash book, as I was reading it, I thought that, but I just thought, oh, this must just be me. But now that you said, like, you listened to a podcast or found that on the internet or whatever.
Yeah, he was front and center in that one.
No, literally, like, Rap was, like, penciled in.
Yep.
And I think Rap is only in, like, 5 chapters.
Yep.
So
I think he was an afterthought. It was supposed to be a kind of spinoff.
Yeah. No, but
we'll get to that when we get there in the series.
No, definitely. Anyways, it was nice to see these characters being brought back in.
Yeah.
Even if just for a brief little time.
And Rap's kind of giving them the rundown of, hey, look, we have intelligence. We think this is what's going to happen. It's going to be pretty bad. We can protect the complex. We can protect you and each other. We've built this place to be a fort for as long as we need. But he does tell them, you might want to go make arrangements for your families. And I think it's Skip who asks, well, what about so-and-so who lives in this state? And Rap's like, too late. I don't think you can do anything. And so they're all coming to this sober realization of, what happens if you defend for yourself, but then you realize they're not after you. They're after the whole country and your loved ones.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes hand in hand with some very cute scenes with Anna. Cute in an adolescent sense. She's definitely growing up. She's arguing with Claudia. Claudia's telling her to, sweep the barn or get ready for the meeting or something. And she gives her some lip and she's going back and forth. But it's sweet in the sense of, even if she's growing up and getting a little more, snotty, it's human. It's a family, right?
Yeah.
It's what's supposed to happen. She's supposed to go through this stage. And then she even asks at one point, I think they're trying to warn her that there's some really bad things will happen. We might stay at the complex. Oh, her school. They're trying to tell her, you might not go back to school.
When do I go back to school?
And she goes, what about Tina? When will I see Tina? I guess it's just her friend. And like that one line from this little girl of like, when will I see Tina? And I just talked to my students today about it. We reflected all on coronavirus and this distance learning. And it was like, this sucks for them. A bunch of them were like, I haven't seen my friends in 5 months. Like, I haven't seen my grandparents in 6 months, and we used to visit them once a week. And like, it sucks for these kids. And here's Anna in the story being told, get ready to hunker down. You're not going to see Tina. And in the back of, I think it was Mitch's mind, he's like, what will happen to Tina? Like, is Anna ever going to play with her again? Is she going to make it?
No, I think it's after the lights go out.
Yeah.
And she first asks, when will I go back to school? He's like, oh, it's Christmas break. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, that was a hard lie to say. And then she's like, what about Tina? And he's like, oh, she'll make it through this. And then he's like, that was an even harder lie to say because she probably won't make it through it. And like, think about like your kids now, and they have Zoom, but like in this sort of situation, they have Zoom, they have cell phones, whatever. But in this situation, like, no one's talking to anybody. Like, that's a very tough thing to tell a kid like this. And that was one of the things I really liked about this story was, and it's been an arc that we're building through our current books. We sort of jumped ahead, but this idea of Mitch getting out and Mitch building a family, and we know that Mitch. Obviously, if you're this far and you read this, you probably already know that Mitch has had some serious problems in his family and a turmoil in his family, and it's nice to see that he can finally have that. Yes, these are some crazy situations, both in the last novel and in this novel, but it's nice to see those little pockets of humanity with him finally,
Yeah. And even though we're getting those pockets of humanity, as you say,
in an apocalypse,
he turns around and he's back to being 100% the operative and the planner that he is, just like on a mission. He's going to treat this whole thing as a mission. He's got everyone gathered and he's telling them, you want to recalibrate your investments. You want to move them preferably overseas so, that they don't totally tank. You want to stock up on food. When you order supplies and you have to go to a physical store, pay cash and go to different stores so no one remembers you buying a whole lot of supplies at one place. Because, think about it. If some clerk remembers, hey, you're that dude at Sam's Club who bought like 18 million loaves of bread and like 30,000 cans of whatever.
I actually never thought about that. That was an interesting thing to think about.
They're going to go in the computer system, look at the security cameras, and be like, that guy's got all the food. That guy's got all the guns. He bought them at, who knows, Bass Pro Shops. And so Rap's like, shop around at different places in small batches, pay cash. And then he says, if you want to bring your family here, make a plan now. In the first few days, you could probably get away with it. After a couple of days to a week, communications and driving, they're not going to get here. Give up on it. He even says, this place is going to be a fortress. We're going lights out protocol. They don't want any lights on because that will show all this. They're up on this mountain in Manassas. It would show all the surrounding areas that they've got electricity. And so he's setting up protocols. He's planning ahead. It was kind of crazy to see this family scene, old friends coming together, and then snap, Mitch jumps into intelligence Mitch, CIA operative Mitch.
No, I think those are important things to think about. Like, if we were ever to go through something like this, I would have never have thought to like board up my house or like try to conceal if I had stuff.
Yeah. Sonia does it too.
Yeah, she does it too. She like takes like
her drapes.
What is it? Or in a drawer, like drawer liners that are black, and like staples them to the window.
Yep. So she can light a candle or whatever inside without people knowing she's there. Yeah. Those are the things I wouldn't think about, that in this book it kind of wakes you up to the reality of it.
Yes.
Well, we're getting close, though, to not only the end of the episode, but we're getting close to the day the power goes out. What does Alton refer to it as? 0 hour?
0 hour, yes.
Yep.
So having to move up his timeline because the CIA is hot on his trail, probably going to implement some of his things that he told the government need to be done in order to save the, prevent an attack that he wants to implement. So he takes ISIS to his stronghold in Virginia, in this bunker that he's meticulously laid out. And at the same time that the attack is about to happen, obviously he's given the CIA some of these substations that he's going to attack. We find Rap sitting on Christmas morning, not in front of the fire or in the Christmas tree, but instead on a mountain in North Carolina, waiting for someone to come. And he has scoped it out. He knows exactly where a sniper would want to set up. He even made a little trap situation so that way if the sniper does go there, he can easily take them out. And he does. But as soon as he takes the sniper out, the lights go out and the sniper just starts laughing.
That dark grin and laugh, just where Rap's like, they got me. We beat you. We won kind of laugh even as he's dying. Cutscene, though, to Power Station. How's he celebrating 0 hour? He pulls up with his Porsche in the middle of, it just says Northern Virginia, and he had the whole thing planned. He wanted to have a picnic for himself, $1,200 bottle of champagne, Bermuda shorts, flip-flops. He was ready for just a summer picnic, celebrating, watching the lights go out and watching these Transformers explode. But having to move up his plan, remember, loss of control, being Christmas, he's kind of disappointed that it's cold and the fires won't start, and it's not going to be this whole show of fireworks that he was planning for. So, what a jackass.
And immediately the lights go out, and the chapter ends by saying, "Merry Christmas, America." Yeah, so that's part 1. That's chapters 1 through, or prelude through 20. And yeah, what did you think, Mike?
This was a strong opening. Really strong introduction of at least 2 new characters. Very believable characters, their motivations of why they are in the place in life that they are. We talked about Alton a lot, but Sonia, how she was a sleeper agent. She's kind of just floating through life, getting ready, waiting for her call up. She's called into action. Very believable that ISIS would want in on this plot. You know, the Russians decided not to move on it. They didn't want to be responsible. They didn't want to get their hands dirty. So it's very believable that ISIS would, since they've been so dismantled after the events of Lethal Agent and losing Halabi. They're grasping at straws. They want something, and this seems to be what can finally put the nail in the coffin of America, and, you know, ISIS can get some sense of victory. So a very believable start to this book. Very frightening start to this book.
Yeah, and we got 3 really good scenes in terms of the plane, the motel, and, you know, the power going out. I thought that those were 3 really good scenes. And yeah, can't wait to talk about the rest with you. So yeah, what are we going to be doing next week?
We will get through the rest of the book. We will give you chapter summaries as we tried to weave in today, but we're also going to give you these big picture discussions and talk about our winners and losers, scenes and characters we liked and enjoyed. We're also going to share some qualms we had. We don't want to nitpick too much, but we're going to share some things that maybe didn't gel or work with us in the book. And so we are going to get to the end of power and the end of Total Power next week.
We begin to get into the apocalyptic portion of the book, which I really like.
Yeah.
And if you haven't yet, which I don't know why you haven't, and I don't know why you've made it this far in the podcast, but if you haven't yet, please make sure you order your copy of Total Power. Specifically, we prefer from an independent bookseller. And, you know, while this episode is dropping, there's continuing to be Kyle's virtual book tour. You could check that out. There's a couple dates for right after this pod drops. Yeah, check out your wrap Christmas greeting cards if you want those. And again, we need to send a special thank you to our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F., and then also our special agents, who we have Matt, James, Roman, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, and Jeff. Thank you guys. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. Please subscribe, rate, and review us using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at mitchrappod.com or using our Twitter handle at mitchrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.